Hey guys, tonight we're journeying back, way back, to a world of silk screens, sandalwood incense, and strict hierarchies so complicated you'd need a flowchart just to say hello correctly. We're plunging into the clamor and ceremony of Imperial China where the air is thick with smoke, gossip, and the faint whiff of pickled radish. Imagine winding alleyways filled with hawkers shouting over each other in a dozen dialects, the sharp clack of sandals on stone, and temples tucked between brothels and bureaucrats. It's beautiful. It's bustling. It's brutal. And you, dear listener, probably won't survive the day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a place that smells like steamed buns and damp bamboo. The first thing that hits you isn't the sticky heat. It's the noise. Someone is chanting Buddhist sutras. Another is selling duck eggs with the enthusiasm of a modern-day infomercial. You're in the heart of the capital. Let's say Chang'an or Hangzhou, depending on which dynasty the dream spins up. But either way, it's packed. You look around and instantly stand out. Your clothes are wrong. Your hair is wrong. Even your posture feels suspicious. No one's pointing, but you catch the glances. This is a world obsessed with harmony, where even your shadow is supposed to know its place. A scholar brushes past you, robe swishing, his sleeves nearly knocking a steamed bun out of your hand. That snack? Not yours. The vendor is glaring. You fumble for coins, too late. You're scolded in a stream of unfamiliar Mandarin, maybe with a touch of Wu dialect if you're in the South. You nod apologetically. Somehow, you owe someone money, honor, and probably an apology to their ancestors. Before you can recover, a bell rings out over the rooftops. Not church bells, temple bells. This means either a wedding, a funeral, or someone of high rank is moving through the city and traffic is about to freeze. You duck into an alley and immediately regret it. The smell of fermenting tofu hits like a slap. A woman squats beside a wok, frying something unidentifiable and probably delicious, but your stomach, being from the future, isn't ready. That's when a constable stops you. "Where's your registration tablet?" he demands. Oh. In many periods of imperial rule, especially under the Tang and Ming dynasties, every citizen was required to carry an official wooden tablet, a kind of pre-modern ID card. No tablet, no business. The state wanted to know who you were, where you belonged, and what exactly you were doing in this part of the city. Guess who doesn't have one? You're shuffled off to a small guard station. Not jail. Yet. Just a long room where you're left to sweat beside a grandmother muttering curses and a goat tied to a post. The goat stares at you like it knows you don't belong. Eventually, a bored official with ink-stained fingers flips through scrolls, gives you a once-over, and sighs. You're fined with a bribe, paid through labor, sweeping the street outside the Confucian temple for a few hours. That's fine. You need time to think. Also, you're still kind of hungry. You sweep in silence, inhaling incense and listening to a passing lecture about filial piety. Apparently, you must obey your parents even after they die. Not just remember them, literally obey them. Ancestor worship isn't optional here. It's a civic duty. A group of children passes by, reciting the three-character classic, a moral text so embedded in culture that even toddlers chant it while skipping rope. You hear, men at their birth are naturally good. Their natures are much the same, their habits become widely different. You nod like you understand. You don't. A local man, kindly but bemused, offers you a bamboo fan. "Too pale," he says. "You'll burn." That's true. You're already turning pink in the sun. He hands you a straw hat with the same gravity as someone offering a helmet before a battle. You thank him and realize people are kind. As long as you're polite, deferential, and don't step on anyone's metaphorical toes. Historians still argue whether life in Imperial China was more orderly than chaotic. On paper, everything had a place: tax codes, marriage laws, hairstyles regulated by social class. But in practice, it was like trying to conduct an orchestra where every player thinks they're the conductor. Take, for example, the civil servant structure. In theory, it was a perfect meritocracy. Study hard, pass the exams, climb the ranks. But in practice? Nepotism. Bribery. That one guy who keeps quoting Confucius but can't do math. Still, the system worked, mostly. Cities functioned, food got distributed, eventually, and major infrastructure projects like the Grand Canal kept trade flowing from Beijing to Hangzhou. The bureaucracy was immense, obsessive, and often impressive if you weren't on the receiving end of its endless regulations. Later, you wander into a quiet side street. A scholar sits at a table grinding ink with a kind of hypnotic grace. He writes poetry on rice paper, never looking up. You pause to watch. The characters dance like smoke, elegant, ephemeral, beyond your understanding. Do you write? He asks suddenly. You shake your head. He smiles. Then watch until you can. That's the thing about Imperial China, even as it overwhelms, it invites. There's space here for beauty, for slowness, for quiet awe. Even if it's also trying to kill you with dysentery. You leave the street with your bamboo broom, your straw hat, and one clear thought. You might not make it through the night, but you'll definitely remember the sound of temple bells and the smell of lotus blossoms in the heat. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the city. You think it's time to rest, but rest in Imperial China is a bit of a misnomer. You're led to your lodging for the night, a modest guest house tucked behind a lacquered red door and a silk curtain that's seen better centuries. The innkeeper bows, hands you a bundle of robes and gestures toward your bed. It's a wooden plank. Okay, that's dramatic. It's a sleeping platform with a thin straw mat and a pillow that turns out to be a hard ceramic cylinder decorated with painted cranes and plum blossoms. Pretty? Sure. Comfortable? Not unless you're into scoliosis cosplay. You lie back and feel every vertebra protest. The pillow presses against your neck like it's trying to teach you a lesson in humility. That soft, memory foam luxury you're used to? Not invented yet. These ceramic pillows were meant to keep elaborate hairstyles intact and supposedly cool the head during humid nights. Mostly, they just make you wish you'd never been born with a spine. Just as you're adjusting to this medieval chiropractic experience, you hear the shuffle of fabric outside your room. A woman passes by, tiny steps muffled under layers of silk. You catch a glimpse of her feet and wince. They're bound, crushed and reshaped to fit into embroidered lotus shoes no longer than a child's palm. Foot binding, beauty, prestige, and lifetime disability all wrapped up in a silk ribbon. This wasn't just vanity, it was social survival. Families bound their daughters' feet to improve marriage prospects, secure alliances, and show off wealth. After all, a woman who couldn't walk far clearly didn't need to work. Historians still argue whether women willingly embraced foot binding for status or were purely victims of a cruel norm. Probably both. Either way, you're watching someone float by like a ghost, and it's equal parts graceful and horrifying. You shuffle back into your room, trying not to think about your own feet. Suddenly, they seem way too functional. The inn provides a wash basin, a chipped ceramic bowl filled with tepid water, and a towel that doubles as sandpaper. You splash your face and prepare for bed only to realize the walls are paper thin. Literally. Thin wooden frames stretched with oiled paper let sound drift like smoke. You hear a whispered argument in the next room about who insulted whose grandmother. A baby cries somewhere. Someone laughs at a joke that clearly involves your haircut. You consider closing the window shutters, but they don't really shut. So you lie down, ceramic pillow digging into your jaw, and try to sleep to the lullaby of city noise, insect chirps, and a distant dog howling like it knows the dynasty is doomed. Just as you start to drift off, a loud clang jolts you awake. A night patrol walks past the guest house, banging gongs and chanting warnings. Keep your lanterns trimmed. Thieves beware. Great. Now you're anxious and awake. You sit up and reach for something familiar, your phone. But of course, this is the year 1421 or 976 or something equally pre-Wi-Fi. All you have is the fan left by the kind man earlier, which you wave in slow, sleepy circles, trying to will the night to move faster. Morning comes early. Roosters scream like they've got revenge in their throats, and the courtyard erupts with activity. You step outside, bleary-eyed, to find that someone has left you breakfast. It's rice porridge. Again. Congee, as they call it, is warm, bland, and strangely comforting. There's a preserved egg floating in it, black and slightly gelatinous. You poke it. It pokes back. You eat the porridge anyway, it's better than going hungry. And when someone offers you pickled vegetables on the side, you say yes, despite the fact they smell like a fermented dare. Breakfast over, you try to stretch. Bad idea. You're sore from sleeping like a stylized porcelain doll, and your neck feels like it's been in a car accident with a Ming vase. You mutter a curse and immediately catch yourself. What if cursing offends a local spirit? Spiritual belief in Imperial China isn't just an afterthought, it's an ambient atmosphere. People believe in ancestor spirits, kitchen gods, and the idea that bad energy can linger in your house if you leave your chopsticks stuck upright in rice. Ghosts are not metaphorical here. They are part of the daily weather report. You wander the courtyard where a servant is burning joss paper, thin sheets made to resemble money, clothes, and other goods. They're offerings for the dead, sent by fire to the spirit world. The smoke rises in elegant spirals, carrying messages to ancestors who might otherwise get grumpy. A boy offers you a bundle of paper shoes to burn. You hesitate. Are you expected to have ghost contacts? He nods solemnly, and you toss the paper into the fire, just in case. Later, you find a small group of locals performing morning stretches. It looks like Tai Chi, slow and meditative. You join in because your back needs something. A woman in her 60s moves with more grace than you ever have. You wobble like a broken crane. She chuckles. Too much wind in your liver, she says. You think she's joking. She is not. In traditional Chinese medicine, internal imbalances are blamed for everything. Colds, wind invasion, acne, too much heat, depression, spleen deficiency, and that back pain. Your chi is probably all over the place. You try to imitate the flow of the movement. It helps. A little. You breathe in incense, out carbon monoxide from the neighbor's coal stove. You're adapting. Slowly. Until you see your next challenge. It's a bathhouse. You'd love a bath, of course, but shared bathing here is an experience. You're guided into a stone room filled with steam, the scent of medicinal herbs, and the sound of slapping bodies being scrubbed within an inch of their lives. You're handed a hemp cloth and pointed toward a stool. You sit. You wait. Then someone pours a bucket of scalding water over your head without warning. You gasp. A pair of strong hands begin scrubbing your back like you're an old wok with burnt rice stuck to the bottom. You emerge an hour later with skin pink, pores clear, and dignity slightly reduced. But you're clean. Really clean. You dry off with another sandpaper towel, redress in fresh robes, loose, layered, slightly itchy, and step outside feeling actually not terrible. Your pillow was ceramic. Your feet are blistered. You've been spiritually hazed and physically exfoliated. But hey, you made it through the night. And now the streets are calling again. The morning light spills golden over the rooftops and you soar, scrubbed and slightly wiser, step into the hive of the city once again. Today you've got a bigger problem than foot chafing or ceramic pillows. You need work. Why? Because you're broke. And in Imperial China, idleness isn't just frowned upon, it can be punishable. The empire believes in the moral value of labor. You don't work, you don't eat. And worse, you might get mistaken for a vagrant or worse yet, a criminal. The magistrates love paperwork, but they love neat, functioning social roles even more. So unless you're planning on reinventing yourself as a wandering monk, not a great idea, more on that later, you'd better find a gig. Your first stop is the local bulletin board. It's not digital, obviously, but it is covered in neat brushstroke notices, handwritten postings stuck to wood with blobs of rice paste. One advertises a need for brick haulers. Another seeks a letter writer fluent in classical Chinese. You squint. Is there a position for bewildered time traveler with lower back issues? No? Okay. You try the brick hauling job. The foreman eyes you skeptically but waves you over. You're handed a woven rope harness and shown a pile of stones that could crush your modern ergonomic expectations in a single afternoon. You lift one. Your spine gives a very audible nope. Turns out centuries of squatting toilets have made your legs weak and your form worse. You're politely told to go sweep something. So you move to the letter writing stall. A Confucian scholar sits cross-legged under a canvas awning, scratching characters onto paper with such fluid grace it looks like the ink obeys him out of fear. You sit down, pick up the brush, and promptly ruin a sheet of precious mulberry paper with your chicken scratch scribbles. The scholar recoils. Your hand, he says, has no discipline. That's fair. You apologize, bow twice, and wander off, trailed by the scent of shame and spilled ink. Historians still argue whether the commoner had any real upward mobility in Imperial China. Technically, the civil service exam system was a golden ticket. Pass the exam, and even a peasant's son could rise to great heights. In practice, you needed years of schooling, expensive tutors, and usually some connections. Social mobility existed, but it was more aspirational than achievable. Your next idea is to try the market. Surely you can sell something. Except, of course, you have nothing. No rice. No silk. Not even a few coins to barter. A woman selling sweet bean cakes sees your face and takes pity. She offers you one, then immediately retracts it. You'll have to earn it, she says, handing you a fly swatter made of horsehair. She points to a nearby table stacked with delicate rice pastries. Your job? Keep the flies off. You sweat like your honor depends on it. And it does. Each time a fly lands on the sugared surface, she glares at you like you've let a Ming general fall in battle. After 20 minutes, she hands you a bean cake. It's warm, soft, sweet, and, you swear, the most divine thing you've ever tasted. You thank her like she just gave you a winning lottery ticket. She laughs. You're not from here, are you? You nod. Sort of. By midday, the market swells with noise and heat. You see blacksmiths pounding iron into tools, papermakers dipping frames into pulp, and a woman who appears to be selling homemade ink out of gourd bottles. There's an herbalist, too, with a stall full of dried lizards, tiger bones, probably fake, and things that look suspiciously like beetles. He offers you a tonic for strength. You decline. You've learned your lesson about ancient energy drinks. A man beckons you toward a red tent, promising the art of face reading. You sit unsure. He stares at you, squints, and announces you have wandering eyebrows. You will never stay long in one place. Nailed it. Still, not everyone in the crowd is so friendly. A local man brushes past you and mutters something sharp. You've broken a taboo. Again. Turns out your hand gestures too wide, too animated, are read as aggressive. Even how you look someone in the eye can come off as disrespectful. You're learning that behavior here is a quiet choreography. You flailed. Everyone noticed. You retreat from the crowd and wander toward a side alley lined with workshops. You watch a calligrapher paint scrolls with quiet devotion, his brush dancing across silk like wind over water. Then you see it, a small group of children gathered around a storyteller. He's old, his beard long and white, his robe patched but clean. He's tapping a bamboo stick rhythmically against a wooden board as he recites tales of ancient battles, clever judges, and magical tigers. The children are riveted. So are you. The rhythm of the language, the cadence of the pauses, it's better than Netflix. You inch closer, entranced. When the story ends, the old man gives you a look. Not hostile, curious. You have a strange face, he says, but a listening heart. You sit beside him. You listen, and slowly you begin to mimic his tapping rhythm. He doesn't stop you. In fact, he nods. Is this a job? Maybe not officially, but it's something. A place to be. A small audience. A story shared. By evening, you're back at the guest house. The ceramic pillow awaits, silently judging you. But this time, you're not dreading it as much. You have blisters. You have been cake crumbs in your robe. And you've sort of been adopted by a street storyteller. Today, you didn't just survive. You adapted. Tomorrow, who knows? Maybe you'll try the temple. Or shadow the tax collector. Or finally figure out how to sit without offending 5 different dynastic values. But tonight, as crickets chirp and the city winds down, you realize something else. Work isn't just survival here. It's identity, status, rhythm, and slowly, like ink sinking into paper, you're becoming part of that rhythm. By now, your feet have accepted their fate, your stomach has learned to love rice porridge, and the ceramic pillow, well, that's still a crime against vertebrae. But it's a new day, and you're off to the next layer of Imperial China's clockwork society. The bureaucracy. And oh, is it a labyrinth? Today, you're shadowing a district magistrate, a man who looks both dignified and deeply tired. His hat is tall and winged, impractical but unmistakably official. He greets you with a nod that says, I have exactly 0 minutes for nonsense, and leads you into his yamen, his administrative office, courtroom, and living quarters all in one. The moment you step through the threshold, it's like entering a different universe. Paper scrolls hang from every wall. A scribe is already copying a confession. 2 constables argue in hushed tones about a stolen goose. There's a line of people, peasants mostly, clutching petitions, hoping to get a moment of justice. You're put to work, kind of. You're handed a long brush and told to copy a complaint about a land dispute. It's a simple matter. Farmer A insists Farmer B's ox wandered over the boundary and trampled his crops. You try to keep up, but every third character escapes your memory. The assistant sighs and finishes it himself, dipping his brush with practiced rhythm. The magistrate, meanwhile, is presiding over a petty theft case. The accused, a young man with nervous eyes, is kneeling before him, head lowered. The mood is tense. Everyone is watching. The magistrate reads from a bamboo slip and asks a question in a slow, deliberate tone. Here, justice is as much performance as principle. It's all about formality, ritualized, precise. The goal is harmony, not necessarily truth. Confession is key. In fact, the legal system depends on it. Without a confession, cases often stall, which leads to some questionable encouragement tactics. You flinch as a constable walks past, carrying what looks like a large paddle. It's the infamous jian or punishment board. A few swats to the backside might be suggested to speed up a confession. Not fun. Still technically legal. Historians still argue whether Imperial China's justice system was more about deterrence or spectacle. Either way, you don't want to be on trial. After the verdict is delivered, restitution, no flogging, you follow the magistrate as he returns to his desk, sighing deeply. He pours tea, offers you some. It's bitter and strong, just like his expression. He explains, in between loud sips, that his role is a cosmic balancing act. He's judge, tax auditor, moral teacher, and local therapist all rolled into one. He's expected to keep the peace, collect the grain quota, settle disputes, and ensure no one's ancestors are being disrespected. Oh, and also write poems on holidays. Naturally, you ask about his training. Turns out he passed the Imperial Civil Service exams Keiju. A nightmare of memorization. Candidates had to recite and interpret Confucian texts, compose formal essays, and not die of boredom during 3 days locked in a tiny exam cell with a chamber pot. Only 1 or 2% passed. And passing didn't guarantee wealth, it meant years in distant provinces trying not to lose your soul to paperwork. But it brought honor, which here is worth more than silver. You step outside for air. There you spot a group of students with scrolls tucked under their arms. They're preparing for the next round of exams. They recite lines of Confucius aloud in a hypnotic rhythm. Cultivate oneself, regulate the family, govern the state, bring peace to the world. You try to join in. You butcher the tone. They glance sideways, half amused. One whispers to you, "We sleep 4 hours. We memorize while chewing bitter herbs. To stay awake." You're horrified. They're proud. Back inside, you're sent to observe tax record keeping. A clerk shows you tallies of how many strings of copper cash have been collected this quarter. The abacus clicks. Ink stains the pages. Farmers paid in rice or labor or coin, depending on their station. There's a deep logic to it, but it's inflexible. You ask what happens if someone can't pay. The clerk grimaces. Back taxes compound. Eventually, the land goes to someone else. You don't ask again. But here's a twist, not all bureaucrats are cold-hearted. Some are true idealists. One even invites you to his family compound where he teaches calligraphy to poor children in his spare time. He pours you tea, smiles gently, and says, "Service is the path, not power." You wonder how long he will survive the court politics. Because that's the unspoken truth. Every official, no matter how far from the capital, is constantly looking over his shoulder. Letters must be written in the correct tone. Reports must flatter but not fawn. A single mistake can lead to demotion or exile. Yes, exile. Often to mosquito-infested marshlands or the cold north. If you're lucky, there's a famous case you hear about. An honest magistrate who tried to expose corruption in the salt trade. He was banished to a remote post near the border, where the winters are so cold your teeth get frostbite. His crime? Making powerful people look bad. Classic mistake. You realize, watching a scribe carefully seal a document with red wax, that this whole system runs on ink, fear, and ambition. It's beautiful, it's brutal, and it's maddeningly delicate. As the sun dips again behind the pagoda roofs, the yamen slowly empties. The magistrate waves you off with a grunt and a half-smile, high praise, apparently. You step out into the cooling air, mind buzzing with thoughts of justice and hierarchy and tea that tastes like wet bark. A dog barks in the alley. Somewhere, a bell rings for evening prayers. And you think, surviving here isn't just about endurance. It's about learning the dance. Every bow, every pause, every stroke of the brush is part of a larger performance. One misstep? You're out of the troop. But you're starting to feel the rhythm. It's your 5th day in Imperial China, and while your calves scream every time you squat, seriously, how are these positions sustainable? You're adjusting. Somewhat. You've yet to be arrested, cursed by a Taoist priest, or mistaken for a barbarian. Okay, maybe once, but you had it coming for asking if noodles could be eaten cold. Today, you're heading to a place that's both sacred and mysterious, the temple. Not just for prayer, though that's part of it, but to better understand how deeply spirituality shapes daily life here. Religion isn't compartmentalized like in the modern world. It's woven through everything, from politics to farming to whether your neighbor will lend you a broom. The temple sits on a gentle hill, its stone steps worn smooth by centuries of sandaled feet. The entrance is flanked by incense urns, their smoke curling into the morning air like tendrils of a dream. You bow. Not because you're religious, but because everyone else is, and you're learning not to cause diplomatic incidents before breakfast. A Taoist monk greets you. He has eyebrows like willow branches and a gaze that seems to read your blood pressure. He says little, gestures much, and leads you into a courtyard where novices sweep in synchronized silence. The first thing you learn? Temples are noisy in a quiet kind of way. There's chanting, rustling robes, the steady rhythm of broom on stone. You're handed incense sticks. You hold them wrong. The monk gently corrects you. Face north, he says. Always north? You do. You smell faintly of sandalwood for the rest of the day. Now here's a twist. Temples in Imperial China are more than religious centers. They're community hubs, libraries, even hospitals in a pinch. They offer education, shelter for travelers, and spiritual insurance against everything from fire to infertility. They're spiritual Swiss army knives. You peek inside the main hall. Statues of deities loom large, gold-painted, serene, and terrifying all at once. You recognize none of them. That one might be Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion. Or maybe a local river spirit who also handles midterm exams. The lines blur. A monk hands you a scroll filled with Taoist scripture. It's poetic, vague, and philosophical in that way that makes your head itch. Something about water flowing around stone. You nod like it makes sense. He nods back, pleased. You're not sure if you just agreed to enlightenment or goat sacrifice. Historians still argue whether Taoism or Buddhism held more sway during different dynasties. Truth is, most people here practice a cozy blend of both, plus a hearty dose of ancestor worship. Spirituality in Imperial China is like a buffet. Take a little of this, a little of that, just don't skip your offerings on Ghost Day. Speaking of which, the monk shows you how to fold paper money, spirit cash, for the dead. You try. Yours looks like a crumpled dumpling. He's kind, but silently replaces it with one of his. Rituals matter. Precision matters. Dead ancestors don't want monopoly bills. Outside, a family has arrived to perform a ceremony. They light candles, bow 3 times, then present fruit, rice, and a whole cooked chicken to the altar. You resist the urge to ask if the gods get to eat the chicken. The monk answers anyway, the gods eat the meaning. You try not to look hungry. Later, you sit with an elderly nun in the temple garden. She's pruning a bonsai tree that might be older than your entire country. She tells you that enlightenment isn't a goal, it's a direction. She also tells you that pigs can sense ghosts, which feels both profound and oddly specific. When you ask her how one becomes a monk, she chuckles. You shave your head. Then you start forgetting the world. You touch your own hair. Still there. For now. In the afternoon, a ceremony begins. Monks line up, chant rolling like a wave across the stone floor. Bells chime. A drum beats, slow and deliberate, syncing with your heartbeat. It's hypnotic. You catch yourself swaying. The air smells of cedar, smoke, and something floral. You close your eyes. For a moment, time slips. You could be anywhere or nowhere. Just floating in the hum of centuries-old faith. When it ends, there's no applause. Just silence and the slow shuffle of slippers on stone. But temples aren't just homes for monks and nuns. They're political, too. Some wield immense influence, especially when emperors are sympathetic to their cause. Others have to bribe local officials to avoid being taxed or torn down. It's a delicate dance, divinity and diplomacy. You hear about a famous case where a temple's land was confiscated to fund a military campaign. The abbot protested by going on a hunger strike. The emperor, touched or annoyed, sent him a basket of fruit and a letter that basically said, eat something and get over it. You wonder how many apples it takes to make martyrdom less appealing. As the sun begins to lower behind the tiled roofs, the monk offers you a bowl of congee and a seat beside the koi pond. You accept both. The fish glide silently beneath lotus pads, their movements gentle and aimless. Much like your own this week. The monk, still wordless, sets a hand on your shoulder and says only, don't rush. Which is rich, coming from a man whose only appointment today was enlightenment. But still, you take the hint. Evening bells toll. You stand, bow, and step back onto the road. The temple fades behind you, calm and eternal. Tonight, you won't sleep easier. The pillow is still porcelain. But you'll drift off with that chant in your ears, that incense in your lungs, and the ghost of a smile from someone who once told you that pigs can sense spirits. It's been a strange, sacred, quietly chaotic day. And tomorrow? You're going to meet a merchant. Brace yourself. You wake up to the sound of coins clinking and chickens arguing in a back alley. Somewhere nearby, someone is haggling with the intensity of a courtroom drama. Yep, welcome to the commercial core of Imperial China. Today, you're stepping into the world of money, markets, and merchants. And right off the bat, it's clear. This is a different universe from the temples and courtrooms. No incense here, just spices, sweat, and salesmanship. You find yourself in a bustling city, maybe Hangzhou or Beijing or somewhere less famous but no less frantic. The streets are alive. Women balance baskets of vegetables on bamboo poles. Boys shout the day's prices. There's a guy selling candied hawthorn skewers, and yes, you absolutely get one. Sticky, sour sweet, and probably not sanitary. Worth it. You're ushered toward a tea house by your host. A silk merchant in embroidered robes and perfectly trimmed facial hair. His fingers are stained from counting coins, and his shoes are too clean for someone who claims he walks to the market. Suspicious. But the moment you sit, he launches into a proud monologue about his trade. How his family's been in silk for 3 generations. How he once sold a bolt of brocade to a Korean ambassador. How foreign merchants try to haggle like it's a sport. You nod, chew your hawthorn skewer, and realize you're being sold to even now. Because in Imperial China, merchants live by the art of the pitch. That's not to say it's an easy life. Merchants exist in a weird social space, rich but looked down on. Confucian scholars rank them below farmers, since they create nothing. Kind of awkward when those same scholars wear merchant-bought robes. Your host shrugs it off. Let the officials scowl. They still pay in silver. Speaking of which, currency here isn't simple. You're shown strings of copper cash coins, each with a square hole in the middle so they can be tied together. A standard string contains 1,000 coins, which is heavy enough to double as a bicep workout. Silver is the preferred high-value currency, measured in taels, but good luck figuring out a consistent standard. A tael's weight can vary slightly by region, by dynasty, and by how honest your scale is. You quickly learn to smile and let someone else do the math. As you're sipping tea, delicate jasmine, scald your tongue hot, your merchant host waves over a friend, an importer of exotic goods from the southwest. He deals in elephants. Yes, actual elephants. Mostly for nobles with more money than sense. They joke about a nobleman who once tried to keep an elephant in a courtyard garden. It knocked over 3 walls and swallowed a parasol. Very dignified, your host says. Also very bankrupt. You wander through the market together. It's chaos, but organized chaos. There are stalls for inkstones, shoes, sugar, lanterns, lacquered bowls, jade trinkets, roasted chestnuts, and live geese that do not want to be here. One man is shouting the benefits of fermented tofu like it's a cure-all. Another is juggling knives to draw a crowd. You pass a bookseller with hand-illustrated romances, including one where a ghost falls in love with a scholar. You buy it. For research. Historians still argue whether commerce during the Song dynasty marked the true birth of a proto-capitalist economy. Some say yes, pointing to the use of promissory notes and early banking systems. Others say don't get ahead of yourself, it's still a world of guilds and imperial limits. You do see a money changer's booth, though. He has ledgers, seals, even stamped paper notes. Yes, paper money. China was centuries ahead on this one. It's called jiaozi or huizi, depending on the era, and it's mostly accepted in cities, though rural folks still trust silver more. Your merchant friend whispers, paper burns. Silver sinks. Guess which lasts longer? You nod solemnly as if this is a proverb and not just physics. Later, you visit the docks. Ships bob gently, their sails rolled, their holds heavy with salt, spices, and porcelain. Workers haul sacks on their shoulders, sweat soaking through their tunics. This is where international trade happens, Arabian glass, Persian rugs, Southeast Asian spices. And yes, tribute ships from tributary states with gifts and exotic animals in tow. The merchant explains the tribute system with a wink. They bow, we nod. They offer gifts, we call them taxes. Everyone pretends it's diplomacy. You ask if it works. He shrugs. Until it doesn't. As the sun begins to sink, casting long shadows across the market square, you sit down on a wooden bench and exhale. Your senses are overloaded: cinnamon, smoke, steam from noodle carts, the distant clang of blacksmiths. You've never seen commerce so alive, so theatrical, so intimate. In the West, trade is often sterile: cash registers, barcodes, receipts. Here, it's a song. A drama. A wrestling match of grins and glares and final price, just for you. You ask your host what he loves most about his work. He thinks for a moment, then says every deal is a dance. Every coin tells a story. You look at the coins in your palm. Copper, a little warm from the sun. They clink like they've done this for centuries. And maybe they have. By now, you've worn out your shoes, your patience, and possibly your knees, but you're still alive, and that's more than most time travelers can say. Today, you're taking a long, hard look at what it means to be educated in Imperial China. Spoiler, it means memorizing a lot of things and crying in brushstrokes. You're up before dawn. Again, it's always before dawn here. If roosters ran the world, this empire would have colonized the moon by now. You're on your way to a Shuyuan, a private academy tucked beside a misty bamboo grove. Think of it as the Ivy League of ancient China minus the dorm parties, plus a lot more calligraphy. The building is elegant in its simplicity, wooden beams, ink-stained desks, paper windows that glow like lanterns in the morning light. Inside, it smells like ink, mildew, and desperation. You fit right in. A teenage boy sits beside you, brush in hand, eyes puffy from sleep deprivation. He mutters Confucian aphorisms under his breath like incantations. You whisper good luck and he nods solemn. This is life or death stuff. He's prepping for the Keiju, the civil service examination system, the hardest test you've never taken. The system is infamous. It's not just a test. It's a multi-stage, multi-year marathon that starts with local exams and, if you're both brilliant and lucky, ends in the capital with the palace exam, judged by the emperor himself. And what do you win if you pass? A government job, a decent salary, social mobility, and bragging rights for life. Fail? You get to try again in 3 years. And again. And again. Some candidates keep going into their 60s. There are stories of exam halls filled with gray-haired scholars mumbling verses through their dentures. Historians still argue whether the Keiju system promoted true meritocracy or just replaced aristocratic privilege with a new elite. One based on rote memorization and the ability to sit still for 3 days without hallucinating. You ask the boy how long he's been studying. Since I could walk, he says. Or maybe before. My mother read me the Analects in the womb. He's only half joking. Your teacher arrives. A stern man with a forehead like a moon gate and eyebrows that could slash paper. He doesn't waste time on pleasantries. He slams down a wooden clapper and begins the day with a recitation of the 4 books and 5 classics. You repeat after him, syllable by syllable. The characters don't just have meaning, they have rhythm, structure, lineage. They're alive. You get 2 lines in before your tongue revolts. Mid-morning, you switch to essay writing. Not creative essays, mind you. These are 8-legged essays, a rigid form that requires an introduction, amplification, argument, counterargument, and about 3 other legs you can't remember because you're too busy crying internally. It's like being asked to waltz through a maze blindfolded while reciting Shakespeare backwards. Still, your classmates persevere. One girl, no older than 12, composes hers with terrifying precision. Her brushstrokes are crisp, her logic impeccable. You learn that girls aren't officially allowed to take the exams, but private tutoring isn't unheard of, especially in progressive families or among the literati. She smiles slyly when you compliment her work. My brother copies from me, she says. At lunch, you eat rice and pickled vegetables under a pine tree, listening to other students debate philosophy. One quotes Mencius, another counters with Zhuangzi's butterfly dream. Someone throws in lousy just to be difficult. It's intellectual fencing and somehow also nap-inducing. You ask why they put themselves through this. The answer? Social status. For most, this exam is the only ladder out of obscurity. Pass, and your family's name enters the registers of the gentry. Fail, and you go home to till rice patties and explain to your grandmother why she prayed for nothing. But don't be fooled, it's not just about the test. Education in Imperial China is a whole worldview. It's how morality is shaped, how harmony is preserved. Confucianism isn't just a subject, it's the software running this entire society. You're shown a textbook, a sanzijing, or a 3-character classic. It's written entirely in 3-character phrases so children can memorize it easily. People at birth are naturally good, it begins. And it only gets denser from there. You flip through it and realize you'd rather take algebra. One quirky fact, students used to sleep with their textbooks under their pillows, hoping the words would seep into their dreams. A kind of scholarly osmosis. Another, some exam halls required students to bring their own chamber pots. Because yes, exams could last days. And no, breaks were not a thing. As the sun dips low, the class transitions to calligraphy. The brush dances across the paper like it's possessed. The teacher stops beside you, frowns at your attempt, and gently takes your hand to guide the stroke. It's intimate, precise, like learning to breathe in someone else's rhythm. There is no separation between thought and character, he says. That handwriting is a bad heart. You wonder what your handwriting says about you. Hopefully just that you're left-handed. Before you leave, you're invited to witness a mock examination. It's a full simulation, isolation booths, sealed papers, stone-faced proctors. The boys march in like soldiers. The girl sneaks in behind them. You say nothing. Watching them hunch over their desks in silent agony, you realize just how much is riding on every stroke of that brush. Their future. Their family's honor. Their entire self-worth. It's not just a test. It's an identity. As you walk away from the academy, fireflies begin to appear, blinking gently in the dusk. You think of the boy who whispered verses, the girl who writes for her brother, the teacher who believes ink reveals the soul. And for the first time since arriving in Imperial China, you feel small. Like a leaf drifting on a centuries-old current of words, rules, and ink. Tomorrow, you're heading into the countryside to see how farmers live. Better rest up. The rice doesn't plant itself. By now, you've worn out your shoes, your patience, and possibly your knees, but you're still alive, and that's more than most time travelers can say. Today, you're taking a long, hard look at what it means to be educated in Imperial China. Spoiler, it means memorizing a lot of things and crying in brushstrokes. You're up before dawn. Again. It's always before dawn here. If roosters ran the world, this empire would have colonized the moon by now. You're on your way to a Shuyuan, a private academy tucked beside a misty bamboo grove. Think of it as the Ivy League of ancient China minus the dorm parties, plus a lot more calligraphy. The building is elegant in its simplicity, wooden beams, ink-stained desks, paper windows that glow like lanterns in the morning light. Inside, it smells like ink, mildew, and desperation. You fit right in. A teenage boy sits beside you, brush in hand, eyes puffy from sleep deprivation. He mutters Confucian aphorisms under his breath like incantations. You whisper good luck and he nods, solemn. This is life or death stuff. He's prepping for the Keiju, the civil service examination system, the hardest test you've never taken. The system is infamous. It's not just a test. It's a multi-stage, multi-year marathon that starts with local exams and, if you're both brilliant and lucky, ends in the capital with the palace exam, judged by the emperor himself. And what do you win if you pass? A government job, a decent salary, social mobility, and bragging rights for life. Fail? You get to try again in 3 years. And again. And again. Some candidates keep going into their 60s. There are stories of exam halls filled with gray-haired scholars mumbling verses through their dentures. Historians still argue whether the Keiju system promoted true meritocracy or just replaced aristocratic privilege with a new elite, one based on rote memorization and the ability to sit still for 3 days without hallucinating. You ask the boy how long he's been studying. Since I could walk, he says. Or maybe before. My mother read me the Analects in the womb. He's only half joking. Your teacher arrives, a stern man with a forehead like a moon gate and eyebrows that could slash paper. He doesn't waste time on pleasantries. He slams down a wooden clapper and begins the day with a recitation of the 4 books and 5 classics. You repeat after him, syllable by syllable. The characters don't just have meaning, they have rhythm, structure, lineage. They're alive. You get 2 lines in before your tongue revolts. Mid-morning, you switch to essay writing. Not creative essays, mind you. These are 8-legged essays, a rigid form that requires an introduction, amplification, argument, counter-argument, and about 3 other legs you can't remember because you're too busy crying internally. It's like being asked to waltz through a maze blindfolded while reciting Shakespeare backwards. Still, your classmates persevere. One girl, no older than 12, composes hers with terrifying precision. Her brush strokes are crisp, her logic impeccable. You learn that girls aren't officially allowed to take the exams, but private tutoring isn't unheard of, especially in progressive families or among the literati. She smiles slyly when you compliment her work. My brother copies from me, she says. At lunch, you eat rice and pickled vegetables under a pine tree, listening to other students debate philosophy. One quotes Mencius, another counters with Zhuangzi's butterfly dream. Someone throws in lousy just to be difficult. It's intellectual fencing and somehow also nap-inducing. You ask why they put themselves through this. The answer? Social status. For most, this exam is the only ladder out of obscurity. Pass, and your family's name enters the registers of the gentry. Fail, and you go home to till rice paddies and explain to your grandmother why she prayed for nothing. But don't be fooled, it's not just about the test. Education in Imperial China is a whole worldview. It's how morality is shaped, how harmony is preserved. Confucianism isn't just a subject, it's the software running this entire society. You're shown a textbook, a sansajing, or a three-character classic. It's written entirely in three-character phrases so children can memorize it easily. People at birth are naturally good, it begins. And it only gets denser from there. You flip through it and realize you'd rather take algebra. One quirky fact, students used to sleep with their textbooks under their pillows, hoping the words would seep into their dreams. A kind of scholarly osmosis. Another, some exam halls required students to bring their own chamber pots. Because yes, exams could last days. And no, breaks were not a thing. As the sun dips low, the class transitions to calligraphy. The brush dances across the paper like it's possessed. The teacher stops beside you, frowns at your attempt, and gently takes your hand to guide the stroke. It's intimate, precise, like learning to breathe in someone else's rhythm. There is no separation between thought and character, he says. That handwriting is a bad heart. You wonder what your handwriting says about you. Hopefully just that you're left-handed. Before you leave, you're invited to witness a mock examination. It's a full simulation, isolation booths, sealed papers, stone-faced proctors. The boys march in like soldiers. The girl sneaks in behind them. You say nothing. Watching them hunch over their desks in silent agony, you realize just how much is riding on every stroke of that brush. Their future, their family's honor, their entire self-worth. It's not just a test. It's an identity. As you walk away from the academy, fireflies begin to appear, blinking gently in the dusk. You think of the boy who whispered verses, the girl who writes for her brother, the teacher who believes ink reveals the soul. And for the first time since arriving in Imperial China, you feel small. Like a leaf drifting on a centuries-old current of words, rules, and ink. Tomorrow, you're heading into the countryside to see how farmers live. Better rest up. The rice doesn't plant itself. You wake up itchy, possibly flea-bitten. Almost definitely mosquito-nibbled. The countryside was quaint, but today you're going deeper into the dense, tangled green of Imperial China's forest frontier. Because while most people farmed, there were some who survived on the fringes, hunters, herbalists, woodcutters, and a few people who may or may not be part-time sorcerers. The forest is alive in a way the city never was. Cicadas shriek overhead. Leaves drip with last night's dew. The air smells like wet bark and medicinal roots. Your guide, an elderly man with more beard than neck, assures you that the forest knows you're here. Be respectful, he says, or it won't forget. Comforting. Your first lesson, the art of gathering herbs. Your guide moves through the underbrush like a roomer, stopping occasionally to point at some unassuming leaf or twisted root with names like Huang Qi, astragalus, or Tian Ma gastrodia. He explains each one's uses, lowering fever, calming spirits, fixing digestion, helping grandpa's knees. He taps his own knees for emphasis. They do not sound fixed. You take notes with the enthusiasm of someone who will absolutely confuse a poisonous root for a headache cure. He watches you scribble and mutters, maybe just don't touch anything. One strange detail, herbalists often test their remedies by smell, touch, and even taste. There are stories of practitioners who sampled dozens of unknown plants, sometimes surviving, sometimes not. In fact, one legendary figure, Shenong, is said to have tasted hundreds of herbs and once turned purple before dying dramatically after ingesting a toxic one. Now that's commitment. Historians still argue whether forest-based medicine was a true precursor to traditional Chinese medicine or more of a regional folklore system gradually absorbed into the scholarly canon. Either way, it saved lives and gave villagers their first line of defense against everything from fevers to evil spirits. Your guide also teaches you to listen. Literally. A deer won't run if you sound like wind, he whispers. You try to step as he does, heel then toe, but crunch every twig like it owes you money. Deeper in the woods, you find a hunter setting snares. He's lean, alert, and armed with a crossbow that has seen better dynasties. Hunting isn't glamorous here. It's strategic, patient, sometimes desperate. Most of the catch is small game, rabbits, birds, the occasional boar. Tigers exist, but they're more legend than lunch. He shows you how to bait a snare and how to clean a squirrel. You're more interested in the squirrel's escape plan than its culinary potential. When he roasts one over a fire later, it smells doable. You chew politely and pretend you aren't thinking about cartoons. The hunter speaks of survival with a calm practicality. The court doesn't tax rabbits, he grins. That's the heart of it, forests offer freedom. The empire doesn't watch you as closely out here, which is probably why fugitives and rebels also like it. Indeed, your guide tells you stories of bandits turned folk heroes who hid in these woods. Men and women who stole from corrupt officials and shared with the poor. They never robbed a hunter, he adds proudly. Too much respect. As the sun sinks, the forest becomes eerie. Shadows stretch, owls call, and the underbrush crackles with the soft feet of things that don't want to meet you. You're shown a small altar beneath a tree where offerings of rice and fruits sit beside burned incense sticks. We ask the forest spirits to keep us safe, your guide explains. You can ask too. You do, nervously. It feels less silly here. As you sit beside the fire that night, watching sparks drift up into the dark, your guide offers you a drink. It's warm, bitter, and likely medicinal. He chuckles at your face. Here's everything but taste, he says. The stars above the canopy are brilliant, like someone sprinkled salt on black silk. You ask your guide if he ever wanted to live in the city. He shrugs. The city has rules. The forest has seasons. That sticks with you. Before you sleep, you're warned not to leave the camp at night. Not because of wild animals, but because the forest doesn't always return what it borrows. You laugh nervously. Your guide does not. Tomorrow, you'll rejoin the world of officials and regulations. It's time to visit a magistrate's court and see how justice worked in a world before lawyers. But for now, you roll over on your straw mat, listening to the hum of crickets, the distant howl of something canine, and the crackling whisper of the fire. And despite the bugs, the dirt, and the looming sense of being watched by 10,000 leaves, you sleep surprisingly well. You wake up stiff. Sleeping on straw next to a fire does wonders for the back, provided your definition of wonders includes the sensation of being slowly mummified by knots. But there's no time for stretching today. You're heading into town, toward order, law, and the swirling teacup of bureaucracy, the local magistrate's court. Imagine the courthouse as a mix between a judge's chamber, a post office, and a medieval Yelp review page, because this is where everything gets sorted. Disputes, crimes, taxes, petitions, marriages, and moral infractions all land at the magistrate's feet. He's not just a judge, he's the emperor's representative in miniature. The building itself is austere, gray brick, dark wooden beams, a dusty flagstone courtyard. At the far end, the magistrate sits behind a high desk, robes impeccable, beard thoughtfully strokable. He has the exhausted air of someone who hasn't had a real day off since 5 dynasties ago. You sit in the gallery, or rather, the section of courtyard shaded by a canopy, trying not to stand out as a weirdly dressed outsider with zero legal training. The cases begin immediately. A farmer accuses his neighbor of stealing chickens. The neighbor says the chickens wandered on their own. A witness offers to swear on the temple bell that he saw feathers in the neighbor's soup. The magistrate frowns. There will be a reenactment. You think this is overkill until you see that, in this system, truth is expected to reveal itself physically. Imperial Chinese law was less about adversarial argument and more about confession, precedent, and moral clarity. The magistrate doesn't want to convince anyone. He wants the facts to resonate with cosmic harmony. The code he's following is the Tang Code or one of its descendants. It's remarkably detailed, covering everything from theft to adultery to tax evasion, with prescribed punishments ranked in severity. Light beatings, hard labor, exile, or the dreaded death penalty. Relax. Today's cases are all chicken-related. One quirky detail. Some minor penalties involve wearing shame placards or standing in public squares with signs detailing your offense. Basically ancient subtweets, but with more bamboo. Historians still argue whether the magistrate's court system represented justice or just obedience. On paper, it was brilliant, accessible, consistent, and grounded in Confucian ideals. In practice, a lot depended on the magistrate's mood, local politics, and how convincing your tears were. The magistrate you're watching seems fair, but tired. He pauses between cases to sip hot tea and stare into middle distance like someone silently composing poetry about bureaucracy. A merchant steps forward, claiming his apprentice sold goods without permission. The apprentice argues that the merchant owes him a season's wages. It's a he said situation. There's no physical evidence, so the magistrate orders both to be reconciled, with the merchant docking the apprentice's pay slightly, and the apprentice agreeing to stay on until the new year. It's practical, if not poetic. But then comes a more serious case. A land dispute between cousins that spiraled into fistfights and burning fences. The magistrate listens, asks questions, consults old records, and finally orders both parties to redraw the property line with witnesses present. The land is yours to share or ruin, he says. During a break, you're led into the magistrate's private office. A room lined with scrolls, inkstones, bamboo brushes, and tiny wooden figurines used to illustrate crime scenes. He offers you tea and a brief tour of his schedule. His day starts at dawn. He reviews petitions, meets with clerks, hears urgent cases, checks in with tax collectors, and occasionally visits prisons. Meals are quick and often cold. Even an emperor fears paperwork, he mutters, rubbing his temples. You ask if he ever questions the system. He smiles thinly. The system is made by men, so it must be watched by men. That's either deeply wise or just incredibly weary. One of his assistants shows you the courtroom's punishment tools, mostly symbolic now, but once actively used. Bamboo rods, iron shackles, wooden stocks. They're tucked away in a side room, dusty but intimidating. You imagine what it would feel like to wait there, accused, guilty, or not. Then there's the drum of injustice, placed at the gate. Any citizen could beat it to demand the magistrate's attention. Of course, if your complaint turned out to be frivolous, well, the bamboo rods came back into play. By dusk, the crowd has thinned. The magistrate gives you a nod of farewell, part curiosity, part exhaustion, and you slip out into the narrow streets of town. It's quieter now. Lanterns glow soft orange in the twilight. People bustle home from market, children skip between puddles, and the smell of fried dumplings makes your stomach grumble audibly. You reflect on the magistrate's role, part philosopher, part bureaucrat, part exhausted dad. He doesn't just uphold laws. He embodies a system that believes morality, not wealth, is the backbone of civilization. Well, ideally. Tomorrow, you'll climb another rung on the ladder of power into the grand halls of the imperial court where robes are longer, rules are trickier, and everyone's watching everyone else. But tonight, sleep comes easy, lulled by lantern light and the fading echo of the magistrate's final gavel thump. Morning finds you back at the yamen, rubbing sleep from your eyes and wondering why you keep volunteering for front-row seats to bureaucratic misery. Yesterday you watched the magistrate juggle chickens and cousins. Today you've been invited, drafted, to observe what happens after the verdict, crime, punishment, and enough paperwork to deforest a small province. The courtyard has been rearranged overnight. 2 bamboo benches face a tall wooden post hung with a placard listing today's sentences in calligraphy so neat it feels rude to blink. You catch familiar names. Yes, Chicken Thief Guy made the roster. Beside the post sits a low table stacked with scrolls, inkstones, crimson seals, and an abacus clicking like anxious teeth. Every lash, exile, or fine must be logged in triplicate. Cosmic order, after all, comes down to legible penmanship. A constable waves you closer. He's carrying the kang, a square wooden collar as wide as a wagon wheel and twice the weight. It slides over a petty forger's neck with an ominous thunk, turning the man into a very sad end table. The forger's crime? Adding extra zeros to rice receipts. Creative accounting, you whisper. The constable snorts. Creative bruising, more like. Mainstream fact break. Imperial law classifies 5 official punishments: light beating with a thin bamboo rod, heavy beating with a thicker one, penal servitude, exile, and death by either strangulation or beheading. They sound like menu options. You'd prefer the chef salad. First on today's docket is the chicken caper. The defendant kneels, palms up, waiting for fate. The magistrate recites the sentence, 20 strokes of the light rod and repayment of 2 hens. Why 20? Because the Tang Code indexes crimes to precise numbers. Cosmic symmetry demands arithmetic. A scribe records each stroke as it lands, brush flicking red ticks like a morbid metronome. You count along, trying not to wince louder than the culprit. Historians still argue whether these public floggings deterred crime or simply satisfied spectators who couldn't afford theater tickets. Judging by the crowd's polite interest, equal parts pity and popcorn, you'd say it's a draw. Between cases, a jailer gives you a tour of the holding cells, low wooden sheds that smell of mildew, soy mash, and existential dread. Iron shackles line the walls, each pair weighs as much as the ceramic pillow from Section 2 but without the plum blossom decor. Quirky tidbit, some rural lockups keep geese instead of dogs. Apparently nothing screams at night intruders louder than an offended goose. You make a note to never anger poultry again. Back outside, a tax dodger faces the heavy rod. The constable presents it like a wine selection, 50 strikes, hardwood, season's best. You watch queasy as the magistrate authorizes the sentence with a seal pressed into cinnabar paste, official red ketchup on the justice burger. The scribe logs angle, force, and witness names. Paperwork, you realize, hurts almost as much as bamboo. Every punishment multiplies into scrolls carted to the prefectural archive where some future historian will sneeze on them. Next comes something stranger. Two merchants have settled their dispute with a plea of reconciliation, basically an ancient plea deal, but etiquette requires a symbolic penalty to appease the law's dignity. The magistrate orders them each to wear a shame placard for half a day, detailing their offense, overcharging Pepper by 30% in elegant script. Imagine walking around with your worst Yelp review hanging from your neck. You suddenly cherish anonymity. A clerk pulls you aside to explain how sentences scale, social status, intent, and even astrological omens can tweak the number of strokes. An unlucky eclipse last week supposedly added 5 extra blows to every theft conviction. You gape. He shrugs. Heaven files appeals too. Mid-afternoon, the prison doctor, yes, that's a thing, checks on the punished. He applies herbal paste, mugwort, and camphor, if you're curious, to bruises, makes sure no one expires prematurely, and signs yet another scroll. Healthcare by paperwork, classic. You're ushered into the evidence storehouse where confiscated items wait for bureaucratic purgatory. A ledger lists each object. 1 counterfeit seal, 3 stolen geese, you wave nervously, a bundle of seditious poems, and no kidding, a jar of tiger whiskers allegedly destined for black market aphrodisiacs. The clerk loves this part. He catalogs contraband with the zeal of a museum curator, then stamps every line twice. Somewhere, a tree weeps. Suddenly, a messenger arrives breathless with a sealed document. A higher court has commuted a prisoner's exile to hard labor, citing filial obligations. Cosmic order shuffles again, new scrolls unroll, new seals thump. You realize justice here isn't a gavel slam but an endless cascade of edits. Yesterday's verdict may be tonight's footnote. Evening approaches, lanterns flicker, and the courtyard empties. The magistrate sets down his brush, flexes cramped fingers, and sighs so deeply it rattles roof tiles. You remember his line from Section 10, even an emperor fears paperwork. After witnessing today's scroll avalanche, you'd add, and so should chiropractors. On your way out, you pass the chicken thief, now free but sporting bandaged welts and a humbler posture. He nods at you, half grin, half grimace. Somehow you both survive the day's lesson. In Imperial China, punishment isn't just pain, it's ritual, record, and reminder that harmony has a filing cabinet. You trudge through dusk, replaying bamboo thwacks in your head like an unwanted drum solo. Tomorrow, rumor says you'll glimpse monks debating ghosts, because why not pivot from bruises to spirits? For now, you cradle sore empathy in your chest, grateful your worst paperwork involves comment sections and not kangs. You wake to temple bells and the faint aroma of incense drifting in through the paper window. It's the kind of morning that feels like a quiet nod from the universe, a rare moment of peace in a world of beatings, bureaucracy, and boiled cabbage. Today, though, your guide tells you you're heading somewhere different. Somewhere a little floaty. It's time to enter the world of religion, ghosts, and state-approved spirituality. Yes, even the supernatural had to file its paperwork in Imperial China. Your first stop? A Taoist temple nestled just beyond the city walls. Low sweeping roofs, carved dragons writhing along the eaves, and the soft, constant murmur of wind chimes and prayer. A priest in long robes greets you, eyes half-lidded like he's been meditating since the last dynasty. He waves you in with a hand that may or may not be partially transparent, okay, probably not. The temple is layered like a bento box of spiritual priorities. There's a shrine for ancestors, a side room for celestial bureaucrats, yes, heaven has administrators and an entire wing dedicated to warding off malevolent spirits, of which there appear to be many. You tiptoe past statues of thunder gods, scowling demon chasers, and one particularly smug fox spirit that might be judging your aura. Here's your mainstream fact. In Imperial China, religion was not a monolith but a seamless blend. Confucianism governed behavior and society. Taoism handled spirits, nature, and cosmic harmony. Buddhism offered metaphysical escape routes and consolation prizes for suffering. Most people practiced a fluid mix of all three, depending on the day and the ghost involved. You sit with a monk who offers you tea, earthy, slightly bitter, and unspools a tale of spiritual administration. The underworld, he explains, operates like a civil service. Dead souls must register, be judged, and possibly bribed into better outcomes. There are ghost jails, ghost taxes, even ghost officials. Somewhere in the bureaucracy of the beyond, there's probably a ghost who processes other ghosts' complaints about overcrowding. Quirky tidbit: families often burned paper replicas of things for their dead, money, clothes, even servants. In the wealthier tombs, archaeologists have found model houses, horses, and full-scale furniture all made of charred bamboo and ash. It's basically an ancient care package to the afterlife. Imagine mailing your dead uncle a new fridge. Just in case. The priest walks you through a ritual, candles lit, incense spiraling upward, wooden slips rattled like dice to get divine answers. One worshipper throws crescent-shaped divination blocks and sighs when they land mismatched, clearly not the outcome they wanted. The gods are moody today. Historians still argue whether these rituals reflected true belief or social expectation, the monk muses. But to us, faith and face often shared the same shrine. You nod sagely, hoping he didn't notice you trying to sneak a selfie with the fox spirit earlier. In the afternoon, you wander to a Buddhist monastery higher up the hillside, quieter, with more chanting and fewer incense-induced sneezes. Here, monks in saffron robes walk slowly, heads shaved, eyes downward. They greet you not with words but with silence. It's oddly contagious. One older monk breaks the spell to explain how Buddhism adapted to Chinese tastes. Karma? Sure. Rebirth? Absolutely. But also ancestor veneration and moral storytelling with a local flavor. You ask about ghosts. His eyes twinkle. There are always ghosts. The trick is not to fear them. Just outlast them. You're led through the scripture library, floor-to-ceiling stacks of hand-copied sutras bound in silk. The sheer labor involved makes your palms sweat. One monk grins as he hands you a brush and dares you to copy a line. You botch 3 characters and smudge ink on your sleeve. Maybe start with breathing, he advises. As the sun dips, you join an evening ceremony. Drums, gongs, low-resonant chants that feel like they vibrate your bones into alignment. Smoke coils around the altar, mingling with candlelight and your ever-growing sense of smallness. You're not sure what's being said, but you don't want it to stop. Later, you ask a Taoist about ghosts again. He shrugs. They're mostly just hungry. Feed them. Respect them. Don't borrow money from them. Practical advice. In the village below, you pass a paper shop that sells joss goods, burnable replicas of smartphones, sunglasses, and designer handbags. Yes, even the afterlife now wants Wi-Fi and Louis Vuitton. You watch someone light a paper Tesla for their grandfather. The flames rise. So does your eyebrow? Here's the thing. In Imperial China, religion wasn't a Sunday hobby, it was woven into daily life, statecraft, festivals, and farming schedules. If the rains failed, temples overflowed with offerings. If a child got sick, out came the talismans. Even emperors made sacrifices to heaven hoping to maintain the mandate that kept them in power. Lose heaven's favor, and poof, dynasty ends, ghosts start gossiping. As you stroll back to your quarters under a paper lantern sky, you feel oddly lighter. Maybe it's the incense. Maybe it's the idea that death, too, has a filing cabinet. Or maybe it's just comforting to think that, even in a world this chaotic, someone's burning you a paper meal in the next life. Tomorrow, you'll meet the scholars who kept this system running, pen-wielding heroes of ink and exams. But tonight, you fall asleep to the echo of gongs and the scent of sandalwood, hoping no judgmental fox spirits show up in your dreams. You wake up this morning with a faint scent of sandalwood still clinging to your hair and the vague memory of a fox spirit giving you side-eye in your dreams. But no time to decode your subconscious now. You've got an appointment with the most overworked, underappreciated brainiacs of the empire, the scholar officials. Today, you're diving into the world of the imperial examination system, where brilliance was both passport and prison. You arrive at a government academy just as the scholars are being herded into the exam compound. It's a walled structure that looks less like a place of enlightenment and more like a maximum security library. Each examinee gets their own tiny stone cell, just big enough to sit, sleep, and spiral into existential dread. A student shuffles past you holding ink, brushes, snacks, and a portable chamber pot. You both nod with the silent camaraderie of 2 people who have faced standardized tests and lived to tell the tale. Mainstream fact drop: the Keiju, or Imperial Exam System, was the longest-running civil service exam in human history, lasting over 1,000 years. It was based almost entirely on Confucian classics and poetry. Success could elevate a poor farmer's son to elite status. Failure could turn a brilliant mind into a cautionary tale. And if you think your SAT was tough, try memorizing entire books verbatim and reciting them in classical Chinese under pressure, sleep deprivation, and the very real threat of dysentery. You peek into one exam cubicle. It contains a straw mat, an inkstone, and a shelf barely big enough for one elbow. A student inside is already scribbling furiously, lips moving in silent recitation. His fingers are stained with ink, his eyes with ambition. This, you realize, is where futures are forged not in battles but in the margins of ancient texts. Quirky tidbit: examinees often sewed crib notes into their clothing linings, miniature scrolls inked so small they'd make modern microfilm jealous. Proctors responded by conducting wardrobe inspections that would make TSA blush. Academic dishonesty wasn't just a no-no, it was a capital offense. You gulp. You meet a former exam taker turned instructor who now coaches younger hopefuls. He invites you in for tea and begins a rant that clearly he's been waiting to deliver for decades. You know how many characters are in the Analects? He demands, pouring with theatrical flair. I knew them all. Forward and backward. But still, my second cousin, he guessed his way into the provincial rank on dumb luck and good eyebrows. He shows you his old exam paper, a poem comparing just governance to the flight of migrating geese. It's good. Beautiful, even. Still failed, he mutters. Too subtle, they said. Historians still argue whether the Keiju truly rewarded merit or simply favored those with access to tutors, calligraphy training, and enough rice to study full-time. You, watching a boy nap against a wall using a stack of scrolls as a pillow, suspected somewhere in between. As the exam days crawl on, yes, plural, some tests lasted up to 3 days, you explore the support economy that's grown around them. Mothers light incense and chant outside the gates. Vendors sell exam snacks like pickled plums and dried bean curd, brain food, they insist. Doctors hover nearby, dispensing calming tonics and herbal stress relief that smells like regret. In one alley, you hear whispered prayers to Wenshang Wang, the god of literature. His shrine is littered with offerings, brush pens, apples, paper cranes, and one desperate-looking donut. Apparently, divine intervention accepts carbs. Back inside, the scholars reach the poetry round. The prompt: compose a verse extolling loyalty using the metaphor of pine trees in winter. You sit beside one young man who stares at his paper like it owes him money. Then, with a sigh that could wilt bamboo, he begins, firm roots in frost, ink bleeds where silence once grew. Even the wind forgets me. You blink. Dang. That's good. Not everyone shines, though. Some freeze, others faint, and one panicked boy tries to escape the compound by pretending to be a laundry vendor. It doesn't work. He is gently escorted back to his cubicle by 2 very unimpressed guards and a goat. Later, you're invited to observe the grading process. It's blind, papers are copied by scribes so judges don't know the authors. Anonymity sounds noble until you realize it also means no one gets credit for personality. Humor? Discouraged. Metaphors? Only if they please Confucius himself. Original thought? Proceed with caution. You watch an examiner skim a script, then toss it aside. Too flashy, he mutters. The next gets a nod. Solid. Predictable. Excellent mediocrity. You try not to audibly sigh. As dusk falls on the final day, the gates creak open and exhausted examinees stumble out like academic zombies. Some cry, others grin, a few immediately vomit into the bushes. A father hugs his son. A rival kicks a stone and mutters revenge poetry. And you? You've never been so grateful for your modern education even if you did bomb that statistics final once. At least you didn't have to sleep in a stone cell while trying to remember Confucian filial piety metaphors under threat of death by diarrhea. You wander home under the weight of second-hand exhaustion. Somewhere behind you, drums sound the official signal that grading begins. Somewhere ahead, the names of the victors will be pasted on a red board for the whole city to see. Fame. Glory. The right to wear silly hats and collect taxes. But tonight, even the future mandarins are just tired kids with ink on their fingers and hope on their sleeves. Tomorrow, you'll step into the homes they dream of entering, the inner sanctums of the wealthy elite. But for now, let the candle burn low. Let the ink dry. Let your brain float downstream like a pine needle in winter. You wake to the rustle of silk and the faint clink of porcelain from a servant's tray just outside your door. It's not your tray, of course, you're still you, but this morning you've been granted rare entry into the one world everyone else in Imperial China is either striving toward or locked out of entirely, the household of the elite. This is where power sleeps, where wealth whispers through lacquered screens and carved jade combs, and where nothing, not even tea, is ever truly simple. You follow a steward through a sprawling courtyard mansion, a labyrinth of tiled rooftops and silent hallways. The main hall is grand enough to make you straighten your back. Painted beams overhead, dragons coiled in the corners, and a floor polished to such a shine you're afraid to blink too hard. You pause to admire a folding screen painted with cranes, then quickly move when you realize it probably cost more than a modern car. The lady of the house emerges, gliding more than walking. Robes layered like an onion of authority, embroidered phoenixes swirling around her sleeves. She gives you a measured nod, then sweeps into a garden pavilion for her morning tea. You trail behind like a very confused ghost. Mainstream fact time. In late Imperial China, elite families, especially in cities, lived in extended households centered around strict Confucian hierarchies. The oldest male held legal authority while women navigated complex social codes and wielded quiet power through domestic management, child-rearing, and, in some cases, impressive political maneuvering. You're shown around by a young woman from the household, quick-witted and far too aware of how little you understand. She explains that while her brothers study for exams, she's expected to master embroidery, calligraphy, family rituals, and the fine art of not rolling her eyes too loudly. You like her immediately. She shows you the women's quarters, elegant but enclosed, with patterned windows that allow light but little view. Privacy, she says dryly. Or containment, depending on who you ask. She offers you a peek at her latest embroidery project, a scene of plum blossoms in snow so delicate it looks like it was drawn with a sigh. Quirky tidbit, some elite women practiced Nu Shu, a secret script written by and for women, developed in parts of southern China. It was passed down in songs, letters, and embroidered messages, allowing women to communicate beyond the reach of their husbands and fathers. It's like a whisper embroidered in code. You imagine teenage girls writing breakup poems their fathers couldn't even read. In the garden, you watch servants trim bonsai trees and scoop koi food with more care than some people give their children. A servant girl, barely 10, refills tea bowls with a practiced grace. She's already learned to walk without sound. You, meanwhile, bump into a potted orchid and apologize to it. Historians still argue whether elite women were truly powerless or simply powerful in ways men never documented. Some became behind-the-scenes strategists. Others wrote, painted, or ran businesses under male aliases. A few became famous poets, immortalized in ink even as their names were lost to footnotes. Lunch is served in absolute silence, apart from the gentle clink of porcelain and the occasional snort of laughter from a side table of children too young to care about etiquette. Dishes include steamed fish with ginger, lotus root salad, and a dessert of sesame cakes so perfect you consider asking for one to go. You don't, of course. You are a guest, not a goblin. After the meal, the master of the house appears, robes crisp, beard perfectly combed, and an aura of I recite Confucius before breakfast confidence. He invites you into his study, a dim sanctuary of scrolls, brushes, and furniture that looks like it disapproves of sitting. He launches into a monologue about filial piety, governance, and the proper distance between a ruler and his subjects, spoiler, very far. He then shows you a family genealogy scroll several meters long, with names, titles, and little notes like fell from horse or excelled at odes. You squint at one entry marked only with a question mark. Oh, he says, that one ran off with an opera singer. We don't talk about it. You want to high-five that ancestor. You slip away to visit the children's tutor, an exhausted-looking man surrounded by scrolls, toys, and increasingly distracted little boys. He nods at you as if to say, they pay me in rice and broken dreams. One child recites poetry with perfect rhythm while another attempts to poke his brother with a brush behind the tutor's back. Some things never change. By late afternoon, the house is quieter. You catch the young woman again, now preparing incense for a household ritual honoring ancestors. She explains the protocol in hushed tones, bow thrice, light the sticks, offer wine, recite names. It's not just tradition, she says. It's how we stay connected, even if half of them were probably unbearable in real life. You nod. The ritual begins. Smoke curls upward. Names are spoken. You don't recognize a single one, but somehow it still feels intimate, like stepping into a family photo where everyone's long gone, but someone saved you a seat. As the sun dips behind the garden walls, you're offered one last glimpse, the private quarters of the lady of the house. Lavishly decorated, fragrant with sandalwood and filled with things no one else is allowed to touch. There's a mirror carved from bronze, a lute resting against silk cushions, and an old poem scrawled on the wall. Within jade walls, the wind still calls. Outside, the river forgets me. You exhale. Softly. Because even in palaces, loneliness lingers. And so, you retreat into the evening with images of silken robes, secret scripts, and walls that kept out the world, even as the world found clever ways to slip back in. Tomorrow, you'll descend from jade towers into the final mystery, death itself. But tonight, sleep like you belong to someone. Scroll, calm, preserved, softly remembered. Your journey nears its end, and just like every life in Imperial China, all roads eventually lead here, to death, remembrance, and what comes after. This morning, you're following a funeral procession. Drums beat in slow rhythm. The air carries the scent of sandalwood, paper ash, and something older, grief wrapped in ritual. You walk behind a line of mourners dressed in plain hemp robes, heads bowed. The casket is carried on a lacquered bier, draped in white. A band of professional wailers leads the way, crying with theatrical anguish that feels oddly sincere. One man throws himself to the ground so hard you worry he's hurt. Someone hands him a rice cake. He nods, cries louder. That's commitment. Mainstream fact, death in Imperial China was a heavily ritualized affair. Funeral customs varied across regions and dynasties, but core principles, Confucian respect for ancestors, Taoist notions of spirit harmony, and Buddhist ideas of karma and rebirth often blended in layered, meticulous ceremonies. You pass paper effigies waiting to be burned, servants, horses, gold ingots, even a two-story paper mansion with a tiny paper sedan chair. The dead need their comforts, after all. It's a touching mix of reverence and practicality, because when your next life depends on your current exit strategy, better to be over-prepared. The procession halts at a burial site nestled against a hill. The feng shui is perfect. Back to a mountain, facing a river, angled to catch lucky breezes. A Taoist priest waves his whisk and chants. Relatives toss dirt onto the coffin. A child lights a paper house, and flames bloom skyward in silence. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, mourners hired puppet shows to entertain the dead during the wake. Imagine grieving beside a tiny marionette opera. It sounds absurd until you realize it gave people, especially kids, a moment of comfort, a laugh in the face of loss, a reminder that life, even ending, should still be human. After the burial, the family hosts a mourning feast. Guests sit in long rows under silk awnings, eating quietly. You sip bitter tea, listening as elders trade ghost stories and genealogy corrections. He wasn't born in spring, one says, gesturing with chopsticks. That boy was stubborn from the womb. You smile. Even in mourning, there's a thread of warmth. Maybe that's the point. Later, you're shown the family's ancestral altar back home. Names inscribed on tablets. Tiny cups of rice wine. Sticks of incense still glowing. You watch a young boy bow 3 times, his movements awkward but earnest. The tablet he faces bears the name of someone he never met but still honors. Historians still argue whether ancestor worship was religious, cultural, or simply an emotional necessity. You're beginning to think the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that the names are remembered, that stories are told, that someone whispers your name 100 years from now and means it. You wander out to the tombs outside the city, quiet hills studded with stone guardians and overgrown monuments. A stone lion stares down eternity. A broken stele leans like a tired elder. You run your fingers over faint engravings. Somewhere beneath your feet, centuries of ambition, heartbreak, and family dinners lie in soft silence. A passing caretaker offers you a ride back in his ox cart. He tells you, between mouthfuls of candied chestnut, that ghosts in the area are mostly well-behaved. They just get lonely, he shrugs. Leave a dumpling out, they'll go easy on you. You mentally add that to your survival checklist. As the sun sinks, you look back one last time. Tombs vanish behind dust and distance. But you feel something still walking with you, not heavy, not eerie, just present. Like a quiet ancestor pacing beside your thoughts. You return to your borrowed quarters for the final night. The floor creaks familiarly. The oil lamp flickers like it knows you now. And in the hush of twilight, you understand why every step of this journey was choreographed, archived, remembered. Because in Imperial China, to live was to prepare for death. And to die was to continue living. In stories, shrines, and the soft shuffle of remembrance. Now rest. You've survived Imperial China. You've dodged tigers, memorized Confucius, failed the exam, dined with dragons, and knelt before ancestors. Tomorrow you can return to soft beds, digital clocks, and indoor plumbing. But tonight, just listen to the stillness. The same stillness that follows every procession, lingers in every tomb, and wraps the world when the incense runs out. Let it cradle you. Let it fade. Wind down, 300 words. And now, with your journey complete and every echo of empire fading into the quiet of your room, it's time to soften your thoughts and let your breath slow. Picture yourself once more in that hillside tomb garden, beneath ancient pines and stone lions cloaked in moss. The air is cool but gentle, and the wind carries only the softest rustle of leaves. A paper lantern flickers nearby, its glow pulsing like a slow heartbeat. You sit on a low stone, warmed faintly by the sun's last touch. Around you there is no rush, no test to pass, No name to live up to. Just earth, sky, and stillness. The paths behind you blur, their trails folded neatly into memory like scrolls returned to the shelf. All the noise of the city, the footfalls in court corridors, the laughter behind silk screens, it's all grown distant now. You've seen how the mighty are remembered and how the quiet endure. You felt the pull of duty, the ache of ink-stained ambition, and the comfort of a warm rice bowl on a cold morning. And now it's just you. Breathing. Floating. Safe. You let your eyes close. A fan hums softly beside you. Maybe a candle flickers in the corner. Everything is dim, slow, featherlight. You've walked through dynasties. You've sat in judgment halls and funeral gardens. And now you rest. Let the quiet deepen. Let sleep drift down like ash from a distant incense stick. You're here. You're held. You're home. Tea, sweet dreams.